Hey everybody, I want to read to you a verse in Luke chapter 2. I'm going to read two verses. Luke chapter 2 verse 10 and 11 says this, "And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord." In our show today, I've got Dr. Hiltibidal in the studio. We're going to talk about some truths about the Christmas story. And I hate to tell you, but Doc's going to set us straight on some of our traditions that are not biblical. You're going to want to watch the show this week and next week. We're going to do a two-part on some things about Christmas that you've never realized before. So stay tuned. All right, Doc, I'm looking forward to getting into this.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the Christmas story, and you're going to tear down some traditions that people have had, and myself included.
Yes.
Some of these things I knew, but when I first met you and we first brought you out on Prosody News back when I hosted Prosody News, you had a CD set on this same subject. Yes. And now you've made a DVD thing we're going to tell them about in a second. But you had a CD set about the truths of Christmas. I listened to them in the car on the way to Oklahoma City, and you were going to meet us there. You were coming in that night, and we were going to do shows at Prosody News. And when I listened, man, I started writing things down that I was going to ask you, and man, those shows were powerful. I think it was actually right after Christmas that we did them.
I think it was.
The folks, the staff at Prosody News said, well, why are we doing Christmas? Christmas is over. Nobody's going to buy them. They couldn't keep them on the shelf. They sold so fast. And I don't know how many you sold. I know it was hundreds.
It was good. Hey, the information is helpful.
And you're gonna set us straight on some of our traditions. For one thing, the manger scene. I've known for years the manger scene's not biblical.
No.
The way we set it up. Now, I noticed out front here, your wife has a manger scene, so I'm going to have a talk with Miss Mary and about that. But, and I think we probably have a manger scene at home. I still like the manger scene.
Sure.
It's just tradition.
Hey, everything in it are the people that was involved in the entire story. It just happened over about 21-month period of time.
Yeah, and the wise men did not show up for the birth
about
of
21
Christ.
months later, yes.
And there's something about that manger.
Yes.
Our understanding of that's not biblical either, is it?
It's not biblical either, yes.
And so this is going to be some good stuff, folks. You're going to enjoy this. Let me get the DVD out. Here it is, folks, the DVD. Let me have this camera here. There's the DVD. This is brand new, just a few months ago, I think, Doc. Let me read the back of this. Truths of Christmas is a 3 DVD set with a bonus CD where you answer questions from, I think, your son.
40 minutes of questions and answers.
So there's 3 DVDs. The first one's 40 minutes. The second one, I forgot to look how long it was. It's
right
probably 40.
Hour.
The third one's an hour and 6 minutes. That was the Sunday night service. Yeah. So 3 DVDs in here. I'll open that thing. You can see them there. The three DVDs in there and a CD on the back. Good quality, done in a church setting. Very, very good quality.
Yes.
Has pop-up scriptures
professionally
and things.
Done. Yes.
Yep, I watched the whole thing this week and enjoyed it very well. A lot of it I remembered from the CDs from the past. But this is you live in a church, preaching at a church or teaching, whatever. Let me just read a little bit about this. Disc 1 covers Joseph, Mary, and her family, with whom they stayed with in Egypt. The Roman tax system is very interesting.
Yes, it is.
And its timing, the system for betrothal with the taxes due and the Roman tax collector. What it means to be, and this is one of the questions I wrote down to ask you, is right here. What does it mean to put away privily? And that's one of the things we're going to ask you in a minute here. Disc 2 covers who are the shepherds. What was the inn that it talks about? Where was it located? It wasn't a hotel, was it?
No, man. No, sir, it was not.
And why was there no room in the inn? Exactly where was Jesus born? According to the Roman tax system, which was the week for Bethlehem to pay their taxes. Mm-hmm. And then Disc 3, I got to tell you, Disc 3 was the deepest. It may not have been the most exciting, but it was the deepest of all 3 discs. I meant to talk to you about that before we got on, but there was some deep stuff in that. You talked about stuff in the solar system and things moving and things that don't move.
It's amazing how God set it all in order on day number 4 of
make
creation.
You think that there had to have been a God that designed all this.
Yes, I think so.
Isn't that why the heavens declare the glory of God?
Indeed.
There's no way you can explain. Evolution could never explain any of that.
No way.
So Disc 3 also covers who were the wise men. You talk a lot about the Magi, and you talk a lot of history there. Where were they from? How many of them were there? It was interesting. You talked about the camels from the time the first camel walked out to the time of the last one.
Probably a little exaggeration by that historian, but yes.
Interesting, though. I mean, it makes a point, though. This was a caravan. This was, and I said for years, there ain't no way 3 guys walked across all by themselves. They'd have never made it. They'd have,
no.
You had to bring your food, your water. I mean, you had to have people. You had to have people you had to have protection. What was the meaning of the gifts that they brought?
Right.
And that's why we think everyone says there's 3 wise men, because there were 3 gifts. And it makes sense to think that, but it's not biblical, is it?
No.
What about the star? How long after the birth of Jesus did they come? So a lot of questions right here on the back cover.
I answered them in the DVDs.
And so let's get into this, Doc. This is it's Christmas time. This show is going to air the week before Christmas, and I think Christmas Eve will be part 2.
Yes.
Is that right? Is Christmas on a Saturday?
Yes, it is.
All right, so Christmas Eve is Friday. This will air on Friday night. Mm-hmm. By the way, if you watch our program on Tuesdays, a lot of folks watch us Tuesday night at 11 o'clock Eastern time. I want to let the people know we won't always be on that Tuesday night slot. CTN's kind of just given us that spot for a while. Eventually we'll lose that spot, and so make sure you understand that 7 o'clock on Friday night is our main. That's the paid time that we're on. Mm-hmm. And the Tuesday night's just a bonus he gave us. But one of these days that's going to be gone. Somebody's going to take that spot. So,
right.
So if you watch us on Tuesdays, and I've met a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people on the phone that
I get a lot of response.
I watch you on Tuesday nights. Mm-hmm. And I think on the West Coast it's probably 8 o'clock at night or something like that.
Good timing for them.
Yeah. But realize that spot's not ours, and one of these days, one of these weeks, it's going to be gone. And I want people to know how to find us. We're on 7 o'clock p.m. on Friday nights and 11 o'clock temporarily on Tuesday nights. Mm-hmm. But of course, we're on YouTube. Prophecy in the Spotlight YouTube. We're on Rumble. All you gotta do is look up Prophecy in the Spotlight, or go to the website Prophecy in the Spotlight, and all of it's there. The YouTube channel is there, the Rumble channel, and the podcast. A lot of you don't know about the podcast. It's brand new. We're still working on it, but there are several shows there now on the podcast. We also have all of our shows, the TV shows. Any of the TV shows you'd like to have on either audio, CD, or DVD. All you got to do is go to the website, and there's a way you can click on that and let us know what you'd like, and we'll make those up for you for a donation.
Amen.
And because folks, a lot of our audience on television is not on. A lot of them have no internet. They're not on the internet.
A lot of folks my age and on up.
Yeah, old people.
No, now. But yeah, I meet a lot of folks on the road preaching that they watch us on television.
And so. Yes. I know a lot of people have asked me, can we get your shows on disc? And I've always said, well, no, we don't do that yet. And
it's not that difficult, and we can do it.
We're going to do it. And we've already decided. We're getting it set up now. By the time this airs, it'll all be ready. So those of you who are not on YouTube or don't have internet, if you'd like a copy of any of our shows, you just got to contact us and tell us which one you want, and we'll take care of that. All right, Doc, let's jump into this.
Okay.
Because we got more questions than we're going to be able to get to in this show. But let's go ahead and jump into this. I'm going to start right here, I think, with the thing about taxation.
Yes.
Taxation. What's the significance of this special tax? What did it do that's so important?
Well, it's amazing. In Luke chapter 2, I believe it's in verse 1 or 2, it says, when Quirinius was governor of Syria. Well, my first question was, what's that got to do with the story? Mm-hmm. So now we can go to the Roman archives and we can discover when Quirinius was the governor of Syria 2 different times. It was the second time. He was the governor from 7 BC, what we call 7 BC to about 4 BC or 2 BC, somewhere in there. And so that gives us a time frame. If the taxation was during his reign or rulership, and underneath him he had 5 tetrarchs and 15 districts. And so the Romans had been in a war with the Gauls, been about a 20-year-long war, and they were bankrupt. So they decided to move their census up a little bit and add a census tax to it to buffer up their coffers again. And because they were having a lot of trouble with the Jews, and probably all of our audience knows that the Jews were always in insurrection against whoever it was, particularly the Romans. And so they said, here's what we want to do when it comes to the Jews. We want to make sure that we get this census. We want to also make sure we know who all of these Jews are. So we're going to make it in these districts under Quirinius, and then under those tetrarchs, we're going to make sure they go back to their homeland. They can't pay their tax just anywhere. They had to pay their tax where their lineage was. And of course, Joseph and Mary are part of the lineage of David.
So you're saying there's 2 reasons for this tax.
There were 2 main reasons.
They needed money.
They needed
and
money.
And they wanted to keep tabs on those Jews because they were always
Well, that was just part of it.
Trouble.
They wanted to know how many they had underneath the Roman rule, because at this time they had conquered some other areas. They wanted to make sure they knew how many people they ruled over.
Because they needed to be able to handle them if
they needed to be able to handle it. But the Jews were always insurrections. So the best thing to do, hey, when you have to pay your tax, you go back, because we want to know how many men are the age of 16 to 60.
So God had a purpose for this, though.
Well, the Bible says in the book of Psalms that God has the hearts of the kings in his hand like the rivers of water, turn them whithersoever he will.
So how was this tax? Tell the audience how God used this tax for his purpose.
Well, it's a 3-year period of time. We think of paying taxes like we do today. On the 15th day of April, we got to send our taxes in or whatever. They didn't have that technology. And so the Romans, they had a team that traveled throughout this 3-year period of time of all the Roman Empire. It just so happened, well, not a coincidence, but it just so happened that the week that Bethlehem and that district was to pay their taxes, and you couldn't pay your tax anywhere except at your place of lineage, and it just happened to be the last week of March or the first week of April.
So for Mary and Joseph, they are both of the house of David.
They're both of the
That's
house
their
of
lineage.
David. Mm-hmm.
So they have to go back there and stand in line and sign and tell who they are and pay their tax.
And the reason Mary, because they wanted to make sure they knew how many was from the age of 16 to 60, because to them that's where, you get over 60, you're not going to be much warfare, and so that was the rules. But the reason Mary had to be there is because the Roman government taxed unborn children as living. And she was carrying a living being. She had to be present because they had to pay a tax on Jesus.
I wonder if our Supreme Court justices, Judge Roberts and the rest, I wonder if they're listening.
They need to study a little bit.
They need to understand that for thousands of years, people understood that was a living human being in the womb.
As a matter of fact, one of the reasons why Joseph thought about putting away privately is because he was fixing to pay a third tax. Because if a woman became impregnated between betrothal and the consummation of the marriage, if the Roman government found out about it, you had to pay a tax on that child, even though it was not born.
Kind of a sin tax, right?
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
It was. And if it wasn't paid, it was compounded daily, and the young man could be thrown in prison.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a very serious matter.
So she had to go with him because she's is also of the lineage.
She's of the lineage.
And she's of the right age. So it wasn't just men, it was men and women. No.
Everybody was there. When they show up, David, it's been 1,000 years since David. You can only imagine how many of David's descendants show up at the same place, because they all have to be there to pay it during that 1 7-day period of time.
She is within weeks of giving birth when they start their journey.
You know, when people say, well, why in the world would a pregnant lady who's right at the end of her pregnancy take a 3-day donkey ride? She didn't have any choice.
Yeah.
She had to be present because that baby that was in her womb was counted as living.
Now, stepping back, looking from heaven from God's view.
Yep.
I've always preached that the taxes was God's way of getting Mary and Joseph in the right place.
It was.
At the right time.
It was.
And I believe you bring that out
Yes.
in the DVD there.
You know,
because he had to be born in Bethlehem, not Nazareth.
It had been prophesied.
So God had to get Mary and Joseph to the right place at the right time. And taxes,
got them there.
We all fight taxes, and we complain, we get mad, but God used taxation.
God used that taxation
for his
system for the purpose of having Joseph and Mary in the right place at the right time.
And they get there, and of course, the baby is going to be,
she's ready to have a baby.
Hey, it's time.
And you're not going to put it off.
Yeah. And that, I guess, maybe should we go right into this thing about the inn, or do you want to go to the shepherds first?
Well, they're
looking for a place to
They're looking
stay.
for a place to because she's going to
You're
have a baby.
going to blow our mind here. You're going to ruin our Christmas.
No, I'm not. I'm going to make it real.
Because we're thinking of they had a place out in the stable with the cows and the sheep and the donkeys.
I know tradition.
We have been taught that all of our life, and you're saying that that's not what the inn was.
No, the inn.
And I believe you're right, by the way.
Well, again, we got to come back to our King James Bible, and we pointed out quite often, words are important. And read it closely. There was no room for them in
the inn.
The
inn.
Inn.
So it's
not an inn, but the inn. So you got to go back, and if we had time, we could go back, and I do in the DVDs. You got to go back to the Stroke of Ruth. The book of Ruth, it begins at the week of Passover, same time. And you'll find that Ruth is going to lay at the feet of Boaz.
They're harvesting.
They've been out there winnowing, and they've harvested, thrashed it, winnowing, and Naomi says, you go out there, and the stories, man, this is rich. She lays underneath the hem of the garment, but you know where she's laying? At the corner of Boaz's threshing floor, as he's laying over the opening of his storage inn. Everybody in Israel was given a piece of property when they had finally, after 14 years, you know the story, they've all been given their property. And all over Israel, those of you that have been to Israel, think with me a minute. You're driving through the country and you're looking at the hillsides. And you say, what is all of those little bitty holes all over the hillsides? Most of those are the storage inns at the corner of their ancient threshing floors. Everybody had a place where they threshed out. They had hollowed out an inn to store it. The one at Boaz's threshing, I've been there, done archaeological work there. I'm telling you, you could probably sleep 8 or 10 people in it. And so the story of Ruth, she slips under the hem of his garment right there at the storage inn in Boaz's threshing floor.
Why is he laying across the opening?
He's guarding it. He's got his stuff stored in there.
Okay, so to get in there, they have to wake him up to get in.
And so that's the inn. As we'll discover in a few moments, the shepherds, they didn't run all over the place. They didn't knock on.
They didn't go to the Motel 6.
They didn't go to innkeeper doors and say, hey, have you got a baby born out in the back in the stables? None of that is all traditions of men And the Bible warns us about the rudiments of evil. And so when they got there, she's ready to have a baby. She needs some privacy. She could go into the inn and have privacy. Hey, but there are hundreds and hundreds of people camped out all over the place. There's no room for her in the inn. So all she has to do is just go up the hill to where the Bible had already said Jesus would be born.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that more, you're saying, with the shepherds.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so when it says there's no room in the inn, it's talking about the threshing floor, where all the men were sleeping, and they're in there because they're not threshing anymore. They're waiting for the next day.
Yeah.
And these little
but
holes.
It's amazing. It's amazing when you put the timeline together. You realize that the book of Ruth and all of this is taken the exact same time that the story of the birth of Christ is going to take place all of these centuries later.
Now, we should back up a little because we got ahead of ourselves. They have become espoused.
Yes.
Which is kind of like an engagement, but it's
more
binding than ours is today.
An engagement.
You were considered married, but there was no physical contact.
Right.
And it would be wrong to have the physical contact. And so they were espoused. But later on, some months later, she's found to be with child. Mm-hmm. And we know that story because the Bible tells us what happened.
Yeah, in Matthew he talks about it.
But Joseph, you ever wonder why Joseph was kept out of that loop at the beginning? You would have thought that they both would have been visited at the same time. You got any thoughts on that? You didn't talk about that.
Well, I didn't talk about it, but my thoughts is this. It's the same reason Abraham was kept out of the Abrahamic covenant. What's taking place is too important for it to be trusted to man.
Boy, that's good.
This is all about redemption.
Yeah.
And man would probably mess it up.
Somehow Joseph would have messed something up there.
So this is so important as the Abrahamic covenant, even though we know it's about Israel too, it's really all about the redemption.
Can you imagine the protection from God on that woman named Mary?
Yes.
In them weeks or months before that?
Yes.
Where nothing could happen to her. I mean, she was the vessel.
She was the vessel
to bring the Messiah into
and
the
when
world.
it came time, she was the willing vessel.
Yeah.
And so this is all about redemption. And so God comes to her. She says, "Be it so unto me." And conception takes place. And it all revolves around, as Paul, I believe the writer of the book of Hebrews talks about in chapter 10 and verse 5, a body thou hast prepared me.
Right.
It's all about a body being prepared for going to Calvary's cross to provide redemption.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Now, here's something else interesting. After this encounter, and we're not sure exactly what happened, but the Holy Spirit came upon her, and she's impregnated with the seed of God.
Yes.
She does not go home and tell Joseph or send word to her espoused husband, hey, I'm going to have God's child.
Yeah.
Now, eventually later on, she's going to go visit her cousin. But there's some weeks and months here where she knows this happened, but she doesn't tell him.
Yeah. I'm sure she's human in human nature. You got to remember also, chapter 2 that you just read a while ago is about 40 years after the birth. Chapter 2...
In other words, it's written 40 years after the fact.
Luke is sitting down with Mary about 40 years after and recording the book of Luke. So this is her recollection.
All right, so that's one thing I was going to ask you.
So there may be some other things, interchange that took place that we don't have that recollection
And
of.
you talk about this in the DVD, and this is important. You're saying that the book of Luke, the author is Luke.
Yes.
You're saying, and he's also the author of the book of Acts, we believe. You're saying that it's very possible, very probable that Luke and Mary had a conversation.
Yes.
Okay, and I never thought about that before. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's very obvious. By the way, if you could, the 27 Talmud in Israel, you'll find that Gamaliel was commissioned by the Sanhedrin, and he sat down with Mary
to get her
27.
Story.
And to get the story, and the story recorded there is very similar to the story you find recorded in chapter 2.
Now, this was also on my list to ask you, but let's go ahead and hit it. You mentioned the Talmud several times on the DVDs, and I think many of the audience doesn't understand what the Talmud is. It's not scripture.
Jewish record books.
Okay, so it's not the Bible.
No, it's not the Bible.
It's not infallible.
No.
But yet it's pretty trustworthy.
It's records of rabbinical happenings, and it's the record of those things.
Okay,
yes.
and so it's through
By
the
the year.
Talmud that you understand the meeting between Mary and Luke here.
Yeah, they're very similar.
Yeah.
Very similar in nature. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so she's with child. All of a sudden, it can't be a secret anymore. She's starting to show. And Joseph finds out. I don't know if he tells
I don't know
her.
how or when,
I don't know,
but yes.
The Bible lets us know that Joseph finds out. He's going to put her away privily. I want you to explain the privily here.
Because this all revolves
Now,
again.
privily is a word for privately.
Privately.
Quietly behind the scenes.
Discreetly.
Yeah.
And so...
In other words, not going to put it in the newspaper. My wife's been unfaithful.
No. Again, in the DVD, I give you all the details about the process. But their name has been put on the doorpost as betrothed. Their names are together. Hers has been taken off over here as an eligible bride, and now they're over here, okay?
Yep.
And so ever so often the tax man comes by, and he always goes to the synagogue, and he finds the names. If there's some names up here that he hasn't collected a prenuptial or a marriage tax from, he's going to go collect that tax. And so once he collects that tax, the Romans know that this is a couple that's engaged to be married. So if before he comes by as the tax collector and gets that, because you're going to pay 2 taxes. But if he finds out that the girl is pregnant between then and the marriage ceremony, that means you got to pay a 3rd tax. He's thinking about I'm facing 3 taxes. He's thinking about putting her away privately.
And I think that's probably part of it, but I think
yeah.
I think he loves her, and I think he's
but
broken.
he's also, this is going to be a stigma on my family.
Yep.
We don't think about the process of all of Joseph's sacrifice in this. And so he could go to the priest and explain it, and even sometimes slip a little money under the table and take their names off the doorpost, put hers back over here.
Well, Doc,
and it would be privately done.
We're going to pick up right here next week.
Yes.
Because, boy, the time flies.
Yeah. There's a lot in the story.
This is interesting stuff, and I know the audience is gleaning from this. And so, folks, don't forget, you can get a copy of this if you'd like. It's also on YouTube. But you can get a copy of this. Just contact us. I hope you've experienced this redemption story.
Yes.
I hope you realize that this is all about trusting that baby who grew up and died on the cross as your Messiah. Well, until next time, keep your eyes on them skies.